So sometimes these moments of Jewish learning converge. This is the week that leads right into Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat before Pesach, and it is also a Shabbat where we read Parshat Tzav, the second Torah portion in the book of Leviticus. It's also a day on which I was learning with a group of adults in my community the book of Eicha of Lamentations, and so it has all of these thoughts swirling. What is it when a Jewish learner finds themselves studying a text, Eicha, the book of Lamentations, that would be read on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, on which we recognize and commemorate the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem and lots of other terrible moments of Jewish history. But we're leading into this day of glorious liberation of Pesach, of Passover, preparing for Seder, starting to go a little crazy with shopping and cleaning. And it's also a Shabbat of the notions of sacrifice that we read about in the beginning of the book of Leviticus. So I wanted to share this very, very simple thought, which takes a lot of bravery. It's a kind of bravery that I think we as human beings are called to demonstrate in the world, because it would be easy to look at the headlines around us and so much of the chaos and uncertainty, not only in America, but in the world, and to say, I just don't have any hope anymore. And it would have made sense during the 100 years of slavery, hundreds of years of slavery in Egypt, for us to give up hope as well. So much so that when the Torah tells us that Moses brought a language of deliverance and liberation, the people, the Israelites who were subjected to slavery, couldn't hear him because of Kotzer Ruach, because they couldn't even catch their breath anymore. How could they catch the Ruach, the spirit that Moses was offering? It seemed to be impossible for them to let that in. Well, I was sitting with some really dear friends just now, and we were looking at the book of Lamentations of Eicha, which is a language that feels terrifying and terrible. If you've read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, or God forbid, seen the movie, you know that this apocalyptic version of history, of the future, where we are just at our worst. The world is at its darkest. There is no hope anymore. Well, Eicha, the book of Lamentations, is full of that language. Now, speaking personally, for many, many years, I have read that story, the book of Eicha of Lamentations, and found myself not only captivated by its melody and the poetry of its writing, but also saddened, because it's one of the only places where my name, my Hebrew name, Menachem, appears, and the loneliness of Jerusalem, the loneliness of God, the sadness of a human being suffering. It is all about being so sad, so alone, feeling that the world has no hope anymore, and that I'm just crying nonstop. And to see my name aligned with that has always been hard. Now to be turning a corner in so many ways and finding a place where it doesn't make any sense anymore. That is ultimately a very big decision that we make as people in the world, because you could look at the headlines of any day's newspaper, any day's headlines, and feel like you're reading the book of Eicha, where it's a terrible theological metaphor, but where God is targeting us. It's another way of saying that the world is so harsh, how could I find hope? So here's what I want to offer right now. We as Jews, or we as spiritual people, reading the book of Lamentations of Eicha, we make a very, very robust decision. And I wanted to share this as a blessing for all of us in the week to come. You know, I've long looked at the Hatikva, the Jewish national anthem, Israel's national anthem, as this irrational, very strange song for us to sing. How could we sing? Why would we say the words, Od lo avda tikvatenu? Listen, we still haven't lost our hope. Because history makes it seem as if that makes no sense. We should give up hope, but we do not. And that is ultimately a decision we make. It's not rational. It's not based on fact. It's not based on proof. It's a decision we make. So when I read the book of Eicha, this incredibly harsh and painful book, based in our people's destruction on our notion of God's loneliness or God's wrath, I look at the very end of it, and the whole book is full of these sad, sad, terribly sad moments of loneliness, aloneness, and despair. There are hints in chapter 3 of still hoping in God. Chaste Adonai ki lo tamnu. God's love still doesn't end. It will never end. When you get to the end, it is a terribly hard ending. But if you look closely at the way in a Jewish Bible or in the recitation of Eicha on Tisha B'Av, when we treat this like prayer, when you read the very end of Eicha, one of the things you might note is we refuse, and this is my point, we refuse to end our reading of the Book of Lamentations the way it is written. The final verse of chapter 5 of Lamentations is one where it says, God, you have utterly rejected us. And you could end with that. And then what kind of spirit would you have anymore? What kind of hope would you have in the world? What kind of relationship would you have with God? Would you choose a relationship with God? A God who has utterly rejected us? Or would you feel so self-destroyed? I did this to myself. I sinned so badly that God will never let me back. What kind of a God is that? What kind of a person is that? What kind of a religious posture is that? So what I mean to offer right now is the bravery that is evident in the way that we encounter the Book of Lamentations. We refuse to read the last verse as the last verse. We read that last verse and all of its hopelessness, and then we read the second to last verse again. We say, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. God, bring us back and we will return. Let us renew our days as of old. We won't read the end as the end. We were going to rewrite the ending. I will not let hopelessness be my relationship with God or with the world. And even more than that, that final verse, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, renew our days as of old. Those were bad days too. There is no good day in the past. There's no glory days that I want to return to. This is the moment. This is the best possible day. So what is it to say, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem? We didn't even last in the Garden of Eden a whole day. We are created on the eve of Shabbat, and we are kicked out of the garden because of the eating of the fruit before Shabbat, which means we weren't even there for a whole day. What day am I asking God to return us to? I am asking God maybe not to return me to a day, but I'm asking God to return to me. Because the God of the book of Eicha hasn't only done right. And I have not only done right. God, you repent, I'll repent. Let's make the next day as good as any day I wish I once had. I never actually had it, but I have a vision of a good day. So let's return to something that hasn't yet happened. The Pesach Seder is full of language and symbol and metaphor, some of which is beautiful and some of which is devastating. So much so that in my own liberation, I take drops out of my grape juice or wine because I cannot fully celebrate. I'm not fully free. The world isn't redeemed yet, so I'm not free. But if I approach the world, Seder, the way that I end Eicha, by saying next year, tomorrow, right now I'm learning enough about my own freedom, feeling strong enough in the world, awaiting the Messiah, welcoming Miriam back so that we can be replenished enough to go give back to the world in the way that we are blessed enough right now to experience ourselves. So here's what I want to say, and with this we'll close. Eicha is a terrible book. It's an awful book. And it forces us into a position where either you choose to cry endlessly, or you say, let my tears reawaken my sensitivity to the pain that is still in the world, so that I can be part of God's returning with hope to the world. That's a way to get into Pesach. That's a way to see this week's Torah portion about sacrifice, because I don't want the return of sacrifice. That's not the glory days I want back either. But I do want intimacy with God. I do want to know that there's a way forward. And ultimately the word korban, close making, offering to God. Please, God, let's do that. Please, God, you do that. We'll let you back. You let us back. And that's the way we'll make our ways forward. So may you have a beautiful, liberating, freeing, sharing Pesach. May you see the hope that you are blessed to have reborn in your heart, not only because it's in opposition and reaction to some of the headlines that we see. May you see it as a decision you are entitled to make, you are called to make. May we be so brave that nothing gets in our way, that despair is cast aside, that we see every increasing step of our own freedom as interwoven with the freedom we are called to extend in the world, so that our story, our song, our hope is the most contagious possible thing we experience ourselves. an early Chag Kasher V'Sameach. Have a beautiful Shabbat HaGadol. And let's put Eicha where it belongs, in the past.